We often spend hours, meticulously planning the perfect workout. We've got the right reps, the perfect weight, the ideal training split. But if you're looking to genuinely crush your fitness goals and unlock that next level of power, the real secret isn't always in the training itself, it's in the fuel source you're tapping into.
It's pure energy management. Performance optimization really begins and ends with how efficiently your body creates, stores, and then uses power. If you're serious about your output, you have to be just as serious about what's powering it.
And the undisputed king of that readily available physical fuel is glycogen. So our goal for this deep dive is to synthesize the great sources you brought and move beyond just a simple definition. We want to give you a quick, deep guide to understanding the mechanisms of glycogen, maximizing its storage, and really mastering its replenishment.
Yeah, we're going to show you how managing this one complex molecule directly determines whether you feel unstoppable at, say, mile 20 of a marathon, or whether you struggle to finish that last set of heavy squats.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately then. What exactly is glycogen? We all hear about glucose, blood sugar, but glycogen is more like the strategic storage unit, right?
That's the perfect way to describe it. That's its core identity. Glycogen is a complex, highly branched polymer, which is really just a fancy way of saying it's thousands of individual glucose molecules all chained together. Think of it like the body's centralized power grid, all packaged up and ready for rapid deployment.
And this power grid isn't universal. It's actually decentralized into two very crucial locations, which is a distinction I think a lot of people overlook.
Absolutely. And this is so important. We store glycogen primarily in two places, and they each have a really distinct job. The liver stores about 100 grams. Its main role is systemic. It's there to maintain stable blood glucose levels for your brain and your organs.
Okay.
But the muscle stores, they can hold up to 400 grams, sometimes more, and those stores are strictly for internal use. They only fuel the muscles they reside in.
They don't share.
They do not share. They're selfish.
That's a crucial point of context. So the fuel you're using to lift heavy weights is stored right there in that muscle tissue, and it's not being shared with your brain or anything else.
Correct. When we talk about performance, we are almost always talking about optimizing those localized muscle stores.
This brings us right into our first big topic: glycogen's critical role in performance. We often associate glycogen with endurance sports, marathons. But why is this stored carb so fundamental across all types of demanding activity? I'm talking high-intensity work, resistance training, all of it.
It all comes down to speed and metabolic pathway preference. When you need immediate explosive energy,
like a sprint.
Exactly. Sprint or performing a set of, say, 8 heavy squats, your body prioritizes the anaerobic pathway. That's glycolysis.
Glycolysis. And that mechanism is fast, but it's really demanding.
It is extremely fast, and it requires glucose delivered almost instantaneously. Now, your body can use fat for fuel, but fat oxidation, that's the aerobic pathway, is much, much slower. When intensity is high, the speed you need for that muscle contraction just outpaces the ability of fat to provide energy.
So your body just goes straight to the source.
It hits the muscle glycogen stores for that rapid power.
So even for a resistance athlete, the ability to maintain power output across a really demanding workout, like 4 or 5 big exercises in a row, is highly dependent on those muscle glycogen reserves.
Precisely. If you're pushing yourself in a high-volume lifting session, you are dipping into those reserves, and you're dipping in heavily. Now, if you shift over to endurance, say you're exercising at a moderate to high aerobic level for 90 minutes or more, you eventually reach a point where those local muscle stores just run out.
And that, of course, is the moment everyone dreads. Tell us more about the consequences of depletion. What is actually happening chemically when you hit the wall?
That term, hitting the wall or bonking, it's the classic terminology for significant glycogen depletion. And it's more than just being tired. Chemically, once that muscle glycogen is exhausted, the muscle is starved of its primary quick-access fuel.
It's empty.
The body has to drastically slow down and rely almost entirely on fat and whatever blood glucose is available.
Which is a real double whammy, because your effort immediately slows, and then your brain might start panicking if those blood sugar levels drop too low.
That's where the liver stores try to help, but they can only maintain blood sugar for so long. When the liver stores are depleted, we see central fatigue, hypoglycemia, and that leads to dizziness, disorientation, and a severe drop in your ability to maintain focus and effort. The sources really underscore that avoiding bonking isn't about being tougher, it's about having enough fuel available to keep going.
The message is crystal clear. Glycogen dictates performance. So, If depletion is the risk, then our next move has to be strategic. We need to talk optimization. Let's move into our second segment and discuss maximizing the fuel tank, both before and immediately after intense effort.
Right, because we can only hold a finite amount of glycogen, so the goal becomes what's known as supercompensation, basically tricking the muscles into storing more than they usually would.
Okay, so strategy one is carbohydrate loading. Tell us about this pre-event ritual. I think it's often oversimplified as just, eating a huge bowl of pasta the night before, but the sources suggest it's a much more systematic, multi-day protocol.
Oh, it's absolutely systematic, especially if you're talking about events lasting longer than 90 minutes. True carb loading generally involves a few days of reduced activity, a taper, combined with a very high carbohydrate intake. We're often talking 8 to 12 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight per day.
Wow.
This isn't just filling the tank, it's aggressively trying to enlarge the reservoir.
That amount of consumption for 3 days straight, that sounds logistically challenging and potentially uncomfortable. So how do the sources suggest we manage the immediate side effects of intense carb loading, like digestive distress or water weight gain right before a major event?
That's a fantastic point, because every gram of glycogen you store pulls in about 3 grams of water with it. So feeling heavy or bloated is really common.
Right.
The strategy here is managing the type of carbohydrate. You want to focus on low fiber, high glycemic index starches, things like white rice, potatoes, or specific sports gels. This helps minimize gut issues while maximizing the storage efficiency. You're prioritizing quick, clean loading over fiber content in those final 72 hours.
That nuance is key. It's about speed and volume in the tank. Okay, let's fast forward. The event is over, the tank is empty. Strategy 2, replenishment. We know post-workout nutrition is vital, but what makes the timing and the specific combination of nutrients so important for glycogen resynthesis?
The post-workout window is so crucial because the muscle cells are uniquely primed to take up nutrients. The key mechanism here is the activity of specific glucose transporters, particularly one called GLUT4.
GLUT4.
Yeah. Exercise stimulates these transporters to move to the cell surface, which makes the muscle highly sensitive to glucose uptake, even before a major insulin spike happens.
So we have a biological mechanism that is literally screaming for fuel. How do we take advantage of that heightened sensitivity?
By consuming that essential combination, carbohydrates and protein. The carbs rapidly replenish the glycogen, and the protein aids in muscle repair, but it also provides amino acids that trigger an insulin response. And insulin acts like the final key, helping drive glucose even faster into those muscle cells for efficient glycogen resynthesis.
Is there an ideal ratio or type of fuel we should be aiming for right after the workout?
Yes, there is. For optimal glycogen resynthesis, the sources often suggest a ratio somewhere in the range of 3:1 to 4:1, carbohydrates to protein. And critically, you need fast-digesting carbohydrates.
Simple sugars.
Exactly. Things like dextrose, maltodextrins, sports drinks, or even, white bread or gummy candies. We want that rapid insulin spike to kickstart the whole process.
That contrasts so heavily with pre-workout nutrition, where you might want slower, more complex carbs. Here, speed is everything.
Speed is paramount. You want to avoid foods that are high in fat or fiber immediately after a session because they slow down gastric emptying. They delay the delivery of glucose to the muscles, and you risk missing that crucial metabolic window.
That clarity helps you move from generic advice to highly specific action. But that speed. It brings us to our third segment, which is really the balancing act. We've established that glycogen is essential for performance. So what does this all mean for the everyday learner or the person who's focused on body composition? Why shouldn't we just always eat maximum carbs?
And this is the crux of performance nutrition when you're outside of ultra endurance events. We have to introduce the reality of storage limits. If you're constantly maximizing your carb intake when your activity levels are just moderate, say 3 days of weightlifting a week, you risk overwhelming those storage facilities.
And when the glycogen tanks in the muscle and the liver are full, where does that excess glucose go?
It gets converted into fatty acids and stored as adipose tissue, body fat.
Right.
So we face a fundamental conflict here. Optimizing performance demands full glycogen stores, but sustained body composition goals, particularly weight management, require you to avoid an excessive calorie and carbohydrate surplus.
So this raises the big question then. How do we tailor carbohydrate intake for those of us who aren't training for a marathon but still want explosive performance in the gym without the metabolic consequence of unnecessary fat storage?
The solution lies in precision timing. Some people call it carb cycling or targeted carbohydrate intake. For the weight-focused athlete, the sources suggest concentrating the bulk of your carbohydrate consumption around the workout window pre, during, and post-exercise, and then moderating that intake quite a bit during non-training periods or on rest days.
So it sounds like we're shifting the focus from total daily intake to per workout nutrition.
Exactly. You're trying to match the fuel delivery precisely to the demand signal. Contrast this with the needs of a marathon runner who needs high carbs every day just to constantly top off those massive reserves. The resistance athlete needs just enough to maximize their training quality and recovery, but not so much that they tip the energy balance equation toward a chronic surplus.
Let's pull out a specific example just to connect those dots. If I'm a high-volume CrossFit athlete, my demands are high intensity and they're really varied. What would a smart glycogen management strategy look like for me compared to someone doing a lower intensity, steady-state cardio regime aimed at fat burning?
Great question. The high-volume athlete needs aggressive replenishment. A high carb intake in the immediate hours surrounding the workout to make sure that resynthesis happens quickly, allowing them to perform again the next day.
Okay.
The lower intensity, steady-state cardio athlete, however, might use fewer overall muscle glycogen stores and rely more on fat oxidation for fuel. So they could benefit from a much lower carb intake pre-workout to encourage that fat burning, followed by a more moderate post-workout carb intake. They're focused mainly on muscle repair, not on aggressive supercompensation.
That makes perfect sense. So understanding your body's specific energy pathway preferences, anaerobic versus aerobic, is what really dictates your strategy. If your activity is glycogen dependent, load up. If it's more fat dependent, you moderate.
By synthesizing this knowledge, understanding the mechanistic difference between muscle and liver glycogen, using supercompensation protocols when they're appropriate, and applying precision timing, you can maximize your muscle power output while staying in control of your overall metabolic goals. Glycogen management truly is the bridge between training and results.
Fantastic summary. To quickly review what we've learned, glycogen is that primary complex carbohydrate fuel source stored in your muscles, and it's distinct from the liver stores that manage your blood sugar. Optimizing the tank involves systematic carbohydrate loading, that supercompensation, before intense endurance events. And most critically for the everyday athlete, efficient refueling requires that vital combination of fast-digesting carbs and quality protein immediately post-workout to exploit that GLUT4 mechanism.
And we've established that carbohydrate intake has to be precisely tailored to match your individual activity levels to avoid the pitfall of excessive storage. So if matching intake to expenditure is crucial for sustainable performance and body composition, the provocative thought for you to explore this week is this. Since we know glycogen influences water retention, what daily weight or biofeedback metrics, beyond just simple performance output, could you track to give you an accurate, real-time indicator that your carbohydrate intake is perfectly matched to your body's unique glycogen needs, and not tipping over toward unwanted storage?
Something to mull over as you optimize your nutrition plan. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Go apply this knowledge.